What before applying rodicides, what you need to consider. So the risk hierarchy. So do you need to use a rodicide, a chemical, or can you control it using non-chemical methods, so proofing things, tidying, hygiene, etc. Ask why you're using rodicides, so what's the objective. 3. Conduct a risk assessment, a cost risk assessment, and an environmental risk assessment. Read, understand, and implement the label. So do use it in the way the label tells you to. And what precautions do you need to take? Protection of non-target species. The follow-up calls to remove remove at the end and collecting carcasses during. Permanent baiting to be avoided unless there are presents, unless it's justified. Disposal of waste, hazardous waste, if it can't be used again. The primary chemical in the UK to control pests are anticoagulant rodicides. So they interfere with blood clotting, causing the animal to bleed to death during regular daily movements. So if it cuts itself, etc. It takes about 7 days to kick in, so the target species, the rats, don't develop bait shyness. And because it takes 7 days, if a non-target animal eats rodicide, then you can apply an antidote, which is vitamin K1. These are also classed as chronic rodicides because they're long lasting, they take a while to work. So acute rodicides are normally used for indoor use. So alpha corylose is used for acute poisoning, again used for mice, normally indoors, because it slows down their heart and respiratory system, causing hypothermia. It's not very good with rats because rats can regulate temperature better, and that's acute, meaning a single dose kills it. You can get chronic rodicides, so you can get chronic rodicides that are single use, that can be lethal within 24 hours, but they can so chronic rodicides can take 3 to 10 days to be effective because it stops the blood from clotting, but it's less painful. Vitamin K1 is their antidote. Cholecalciferol. So cholecalciferol is another rodicide, chronic rodicides. A lethal dose can be consumed in 1 day, or it can take 2 to 4 days to be effective, but there's no resistance or antidote to it. It causes too much a buildup of calcium in the bloodstream that reaches the stomach, and it causes the rodent to stop feeding in 24 hours. So different types of rodicide formulations. So 1, blocks and pellets. 2, contact gels and contact foam. Grains, pastes, rolled oats and canary seeds, liquid baits. So blocks and pellets, so concrete blocks next to some 2-2 pellets. Contact gels and foams, so bath foam with the gel, silica maybe, sat together. Grains, pile of grains. Pastes, just paste, rolled oats and cannery seed, liquid baits. Environmental impact of rodicide. So primary poisoning is when the mouse or rat is poisoned and dies. Secondary poisoning, if that dead mouse or rat is eaten by a cat or an owl, and they would be poisoned. In an emergency, you need to identify the active ingredient that's been consumed and call NHS 111 for advice. So resistance to rodicides are happening in different areas of the UK. Now you get a resistance normally from genetically inherited from the parents. So animals are being born with a genetic resistance to pesticides. You can tell if this is the case if there's still activity 15 to 25 days after treatment has started, if bait is being eaten but there are no dead rodents, or if you're finding droppings that have dyed the colour of the poison. So still activity 15 to 25 days after, bait's being eaten but can't find any dead rodents, and the droppings are dyed a different colour of the poison. So when using an anticoagulant, you need to be aware of the complications such as primary poisoning of non-target species, secondary poisoning of non-target species, and you need to be aware of the environment around you. So different formulations might be loose grain baits, pastes, block formulations, pellets, soft pasta baits, liquid baits, contact gels and foams, and other formulations. They're designed to attract pests. They often similar to the type of food that they would normally eat. Anticoagulants in pre-mixed formulations are designed to attract rodents. They're considered relatively safe to handle because 0.005% are active ingredients. You don't need to know that. Pre-mixed formulations shouldn't be messed about with, and they also contain bitrex, a bit of a Tyrannosaurus rex, bitrex, which is a human taste deterrent. Tracking and dust gels aren't toxic, they're just designed to highlight movement. Contact formulations are designed to get onto the coat of the rodent, so when they're grooming, then they'll ingest, so it doesn't require them to actually go and eat the gel. And you'd use it in areas where they're active. Grey squirrels. So we're talking about grey squirrel control now. So if sightings, droppings, tracks, or other evidence points to there being grey squirrels, you need to 1, consider the risk, 2, identify the control methods, 3, take action, 4, document your activity, write it all down. So consider the risk, identify the controls, take action, document your treatment and actions. So to deter squirrels, good hygiene deters squirrels. So effective management isn't about removing the squirrel necessarily, it's also about deterring squirrels from coming on site. So advise the customers to not feed them, minimise any food left outside, so feeding birds and If you feed birds, you use squirrel-proof feeders. If there are any spillages from the bird food or pets, pick it up. Control spillages of food. Proofing for grey squirrels. So tree guards can be helped to minimise the damage. Stop them gaining access to trees. So tree guards. I'm on guard. Trees. Trees. I'm on guard against a squirrel. Tree guard. Wire mesh can be used in gaps in the fascia to stop them accessing a roof void. So wire mesh. Overhanging trees should be cut back so they can't get onto your roof. To control the squirrels, you can use shooting, and it's good for culling them, but it's likely that due to migration, the population will rapidly grow in number again. You can use dray poking and shooting, which involves getting a long pole, poking the nest, and then getting colleagues to shoot them when they run off. And they're a non-native species, so they can't be re-released. Trapping grey squirrels, because they're inquisitive, you can use baited live capture traps. Traps should be secure and camouflaged and protected from the environment and predators. So you can use live capture traps. They're inquisitive, so they will inspect tunnels. So spring traps may not be effective for long-term use. Control, I don't know. Approved spring traps that instantly kill the squirrel can be considered, and must be set naturally in natural or artificial tunnels, as the spring trap amendment order. Live capture traps need to be inspected daily, and the squirrel must be dispatched humanely. Grey squirrel chemical. So there's only one chemical you're allowed to use against grey squirrels, and that is grey squirrel bait. It uses warfarin. You need to put the bait in a hopper. I'll look up what that is, so you hopefully know by now. Access needs to be required for several days. And remember, if it's used in a loft space and the squirrel dies in the loft space, it could cause a secondary infestation if you can't get to the carcass.